Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, there are parts of the traditional job of film critic that I miss more than others, than you'd really expect. And if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you're in the seats with, once more, as always. My name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast, where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of industry professionals and pick their brain, not just about current projects, but state of the industry, how they got started, so very much more. And, you know, we do things in a light and conversational fashion. And if you'd like to subscribe to our podcast, and I mean, we hope that you would, you're listening right now, you can basically do that wherever you find your podcasts. Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google, it is all good. And you can also find every single one of our episodes archived over at our YouTube channel. Also, we'd really love it if you'd follow us on social media. You can do that on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at either at In the Seats or at It's Podcast One for all sorts of updates. And finally, and dare I say most importantly, please give us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca, with all the latest and greatest movie news, reviews, and anything of the moving image that we can really think of, because that's kind of what we like to do, and that's what we talk about, and it's important to us, and we want to find stuff that will become important to you, and that's kind of why we love watching this stuff and love doing what we do. But, well, you know what? Look, let's transition, because on this episode, we got a fun one. And it reminds me of the things that I miss about sort of the job of being a film critic, which, I mean, yeah, I can do 90% of my job at home, but I do miss going into the theater and seeing other critics and having conversations about the industry, and that's basically what we did today. And the topic at hand was, if you haven't heard, Netflix has recently announced that they have paid writer-director Rian Johnson $450 million. Those numbers may not be accurate, but for the next two Knives Out sequels, which with Daniel Craig, and they will be exclusive to Netflix. And it's an interesting thing, because we see how streamers like Netflix are trying to sort of get a hold of tentpoles and get a hold of big IPs and big franchises, and it's such a Wild West time in the industry that I just felt compelled to sit down with a few friends from the business to talk it over. And we sat down with the indomitable Mr. Norton Wilner, who is a film critic around town. He has written for several publications, but also currently for Now Magazine here in Toronto. We talked with Mr. Jason Gorber, who is one of the managing editors over at thatshelf.com, but also you can see his work in places like Point of View Magazine and several other places. And we talked with the founder and editor of Screenfish.net, Steve Norton, about all these issues and so very much more, and how this business of show is really sort of undergoing this seismic change underneath all of our feet, not necessarily for good, not necessarily for bad, but it is a thing, and it is a very interesting thing, which we rambled on about in a very entertaining fashion. So I certainly hope you enjoy it, because I know I did. Okay. All right. Well, obviously, boys, just first off, thank you all for the time today. I do appreciate it. And I think when I first saw the news the other day of Netflix paying, let's put it into the proper context that it is, $500 million for two fucking movies, I think my jaw dropped, my eyes sort of popped out of their head, and I was like, this might be one of the more ridiculous things I've possibly seen. And I'm kind of curious on all of your perspectives, as we are in this film business of lore, that, you know, this fugue state that we live in, watching movies from home and Zoom junkets and whatnot. I'm kind of curious, because as we're all kind of looking forward for the theaters to come back, I see this and I wonder if the streamers are even stealing stealing the tent poles now. And I'm kind of curious on all of your perspective on what this means from an industry standpoint going forward. And I mean, Norm, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it first, because when I saw this, I was like, shit, are we ever going back to the movies?
I mean, sure we are. And don't forget, Netflix is still a big fan of the 1 week in a theater release model
Yeah.
because they like the prestige. They like the idea that it helps them compete for awards. The movies will be available in theaters for a little tiny bit, but ultimately, I kind of I kind of love it. I think it's ridiculous. Like, it is actually ludicrous that $450 million is a reasonable expectation to throw at two movies. That the first one cost what, 40? It's
Yeah.
these are not massive effects fests, right?
36, I think.
Okay, there you go. So they are not, like, it's not a Star Wars movie. You're not buying a Star Wars movie
Right.
from Rian Johnson. You're buying two weird, eccentric ensemble Agatha Christie riffs, which, again, more power to them, because, like, I had this image of Johnson on the phone saying, "Oh, Benoit Blanc doesn't get out of bed for less than $225 a picture," and Netflix just going, "We have that. Yeah, here you go." It's ridiculous. But the other thing to remember is that Netflix doesn't have franchises. They want them, but they don't have them. The closest they've come, I think, has been the To All the Boys movies, right? That's their only trilogy that they've produced themselves.
And those didn't cost money, so.
No, exactly. They're fun and they're cheap. And because Netflix doesn't do return on investment in the same way that a movie studio does, those are a much lower risk. Fine, greenlight the two sequels at once because everybody liked the first one and maybe this gets more subscriptions. Knives Out is, the other thing about Knives Out is that it made $300 and some million. It was a massive global hit. So spending $225 on each one isn't ludicrous because there won't be return for the film, right? Like, the people who make the movie sell the movie and all rights, all subsequent. If you sell a movie to Netflix, you get nothing after the initial buy. So this is an enticement. And it also it's a little bit of a position thing within the industry saying, look what we can do. But as stunts go, this feels like a pretty safe one. I don't know anyone who doesn't like Knives Out and wouldn't be interested in watching the sequels. So again, if they just want to grab eyeballs and make people excited about taking their projects to Netflix, this is the way they do that.
No, and I think you're absolutely right. Like you say, this does feel like a bit of an overpay, but if there's
it's a huge stunt. Like, it's a huge stunt no matter what.
If there's one place that can get away with it, it's Netflix. And I'm kind of curious, Jason, do you think we'll see maybe more of these overpays so Netflix can lure in auteurs with their various projects?
Look, this has to be tied directly to what's been happening in the festival circuit as well, with the Apples, the Netflixes, the Amazons going in and spending $30 million on documentaries. You've seen an inflation amongst these tech companies, the VOD companies, to try to outdo one another to get some sort of semblance of either awards recognition or auteurist recognition in the broadest sense of that term. They want to have talent that are unafraid to be considered part of the Netflix family, Irishman being an extraordinary example of that. But now they've bought not only Rian Johnson's next two films, in some ways they have brought Rian Johnson into the Netflix fold, that the two of them are now simultaneously part of the same conversation, that this guy who makes Star Wars films is now making films under the rubric of Netflix. Given everything that's happening in the United States in terms of theater ownership, where Netflix has already bought their first theater, I think you're going to start seeing, I think Norm's absolutely right, this is not the death of theatrical, this is fundamentally a change in how theatrical is actually going to play out. And so for them to spend $400 million, which really they don't have. This is the crazy thing about Netflix. It's never actually made money. It's doing the Amazon thing. It's just getting big enough that it doesn't matter. And at some point in time, like the greatest Hollywood story possible, you keep calling yourself a star, you become a star. You keep calling yourself a major studio, suddenly you're spending $400 million on two films that 15 years ago would have cost $30 million maybe. So they're getting a former James Bond. Look, I know there's lots to unpack here. Let's talk about the fact that Knives Out shouldn't have existed. That Knives Out in its current form only worked because another major studio, Sony, actually had a delay on their James Bond. And in between two directors deciding what movie to make, they're like, oh, well, I guess we have this Daniel Craig guy kicking around. Let's see if we can slip in and make this movie for not a lot of money. My favorite reaction to all of this is Noah Segan, who, as many people will know, is Rian Johnson's sort of, a bro twin. He's his good luck charm. And Noah Segan just wrote back his pithy quote was like, well, somebody's going to be ordering the guacamole as an extra from now on. And that's it. I could not be happier that a mensch like Rian Johnson is suddenly on the level of a Michael Bay in terms of them just throwing, or Bruckheimer, they're just throwing preposterous Pirates of the Caribbean money at a guy who makes tiny little amazing movies. And I could not be happier for him. What it does to the state of cinema, I don't know, but it's not my money anyway.
Yeah, I do think it's worth pointing out that these movies will not be made for $225 million.
Well, yes.
Right? Like, this is the price of acquiring the film. It's a licensing deal. So he'll probably, like, Rian Johnson can probably make these for 50 if he pushes. He can do them for a lot less. I don't know. Maybe there'll be a license to do whatever he wants with them and make them genuinely surreal period dreamscapes, and Benoit Blanc will be some sort of quantum figure reoccurring in the 1840s or the 1970s. I don't care. I want to see them.
They're gonna be fucking horrible.
No. I want whatever they do. I want to see, and that's the beauty of this. Like, he's not the best character of Knives Out, and so pulling him out and making him the star of his own ensemble series going forward, like a Poirot, like a Miss Marple, and just blundering into new situations is really intriguing because it lets Johnson reset the board every time.
Well, but I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's an interesting thing, just especially because, I mean, again, they're buying into tourism, they're buying into sort of the franchises and the tent poles. I mean, especially with, something like Justice League, which got, blurted out onto HBO Max and Crave and whatnot. And I mean, I'm kind of curious, Steve, as you look at this, like, how do you think filmmakers are going to react to this? Will it be a positive thing? Will it be a negative thing? Because I mean, in some cases, like a guy like a Rian Johnson has a certain degree of name value and street cred, but there will be other people who won't even be able to get a chance to even closely sniff to a deal like this.
Well, Netflix is an interesting animal in that way. I mean, for a while there, Netflix has been known as, like you guys were saying, the auteur studio, but they were also known as the independent studio. So, like, you didn't have to have done 2 Marvel movies under your belt to get something made at Netflix. But, it's funny, like, Netflix to me has one of the most colossal inferiority complexes I've ever seen in streaming, because they're dumping money. Like, let's not forget too, like, it was 6 years ago that I think that one season of House of Cards was $200 million, and people scoffed at it. How are they doing this? Well, who knows how they're doing it? And one day I feel like their books are going to fall apart. But I feel like this, you're absolutely right. Like, they want the IP. What they want is to be able to say, you saw Knives Out, you liked it. There's no risk to you as a consumer. There's none for us, because we can turn it on or turn it off if we want, and we don't pay any less for a subscription. In a theater, we have to decide if we're going to drop our $15 a ticket. But in Netflix, we just have. I've made the joke that there are tons of movies on Netflix now that I'm paying $10 a month not to watch, and that's just the reality. So, I mean, in terms of future filmmakers, I think they want something like 200, or I think it's like 150 or 200 original contents a year. So they're paying the people who don't often get a chance to do things, but they don't have anything splashy. And that's what this is. Like, they were in a bidding war with Amazon and Apple. You know whose name is not on that list? Disney. Disney didn't fight for this, or at least if they did, we don't know about it. We know Apple and Amazon were in it. Why? Because they need it more than Disney does. Disney can recycle their own IPs any way they want, but someone like Netflix, which as more and more people get into a very crowded market, take their model and do it just as well, if not better, they almost need to be able to say, don't worry, we've got Benoit Blanc, but that's great. I don't know what Benoit Blanc is going to get paid for 2 movies. It's not even a miniseries. It's 2.5 hour films. But it's also not surprising, because I think Netflix needed to make a mark again and say, guys, we're still here. We're still here. Disney may have bought Fox. Amazon may be winning awards. Apple may be trying to horn in on the market, but we're still around.
I mean,
so I mean, when did this whole business? When did the Netflix model go from Mark Duplass to Michael Bay? Because I mean, I'm trying to think back when the shift was, and I mean, I don't know if I can even see it.
It's Disney Plus. It's Disney Plus.
Disney Plus.
I would suggest it's Disney Plus. It's once Disney Plus came in and people realized that through Disney Plus that they're paying for wasn't that sort of weird VOD film, and the other one that they're doing theatrically. Disney Plus happened and people realized they could watch stuff at home, compounded by the fact that here we are under COVID.
I mean, if it goes back a little bit further, right? Like I'm thinking about the big acquisition, or not the acquisitions. There's big homegrown productions like Triple Frontier or Six Underground, where they decided they were going to compete with major action movies. Once they embraced that genre,
but here's what I'm getting at. Sort of interrupting. But the way that Warner deals with Nolan is the way that Netflix is now going to be dealing with people like Rian Johnson. I think that they are looking to have these people that they can establish long-term relationships with, so that they're going to give them a preposterous amount of money now and a preposterous amount of control and run from there for the next half decade or decade with somebody like this, to create fans and evangelists for the Netflix model, and to make it so it's completely indistinguishable for people between whether it's a Netflix movie or a Paramount movie. In some ways, a Netflix movie will be better than a Paramount movie. It may be better than a Warner movie, and Disney is already muddying the lines dramatically between what counts as VOD and what counts as theatrical. That's how Netflix wins this, is for them to be considered not just another player in this, but a major. This firmly reestablishes themselves as a major studio, full stop. Not a studio with an asterisk on it. And that's what I think, in a funny way, is they're taking other people's money and buying that stature.
You know, the funny thing about this too, we talk about Disney, is that we talk about the Netflix model. Netflix model is accrue as much possible debt as you can, but try and get as many people as you can to buy into it. Disney really relies on theme parks to offset that. So with the launch of Disney Plus, they own their IPs. They own their own content. They can produce whatever they want. But that any losses that they would take from the streaming service initially is being offset by other revenue streams. I don't know of a Netflix store or Netflix merch. So they need to do something to try and draw some people in.
I've said this before. In many weird ways, Netflix is the biggest movie-only company in the world. The fact of the matter is that Amazon can continue. It's that Citizen Kane thing, right? Like, if I keep losing money at this rate, oh no, I'll have to shut down in 100 years, right? Like, Amazon sells stuff so that they can blow money on Prime that makes no money. Disney has multi-vector way of actually making money. Netflix needs subscribers, and in order to get subscribers, they got to be part of the conversation. And so what better way of being part of the conversation than firmly establishing yourself as, hey, remember all those movie studios that you grew up thinking these were how movies were made, and where I would go see a movie and I would see that logo. I would see Indiana Jones and the Paramount logo, and that would be a thing. I would see the Universal logo spinning around. I would see the castle from Disney. That's what the Netflix logo is, not just the bong that wakes you up when you're watching something late at night and chilling. This now is establishing itself formally as a movie studio moving forward.
So let me ask the obvious question. Does this matter to anybody outside the industry? Like, do people, like, does the average consumer know that when they watch The Lovebirds that it was produced by Paramount and then picked up by Netflix because of the pandemic? Does it matter that Netflix is the leading contender with 10 nominations for Mank at the Oscars, right? Like, does anybody besides us care?
The first point, no, because nobody knows about Lovebirds or distinguishes between what studio does what. On the Mank side, I would say possibly, because there was always this sort of definition between what we watched at home and then what we had to go to the theater for, what was culturally relevant, like what has become culturally relevant, we don't have to leave our houses for anymore to get that immediate access to. I think that's where the big paradigm shift has happened.
Right. But what I mean is, like, do they know that Netflix has produced Mank? Oh, sorry.
No, but I mean, before we had to go to the festivals, we had to go to the theaters to sort of see the things that would win the quote unquote awards. Now we just have to click a button. I think that's where the paradigm shift has happened, at least from a cultural standpoint.
I think more people know that Netflix produced Mank than they know that Nomadland is a Disney movie.
Yeah.
And I think that Disney is trying a very fine line to navigate that, and I think they're doing a good job at it. I think Netflix trying to have both of those things, and I think that for what eventually Netflix is going to do is to allow them to have that prestige thing without the notion of why do I need to go to a theater to see it. That only important films are in theaters and unimportant films are on VOD. There's a enormous simplification. That's not the way most consumers actually view things. But nonetheless, I think that's what Netflix is doing, especially, again, I go back to where did this start? Festival buys. 100%. That when they were chalking off these prestige festival things that would go to, I don't know, Miramax for years, or would go to Searchlight, or would go to SPC, or would go Sony Picture Classics, or would go to any of these other mini majors. That's the stuff that's just inevitably going VOD now. And then you have something like, what is TIFF? What is the Toronto International Film Festival's main content going for? What is Sundance's main prestige content coming from? It's coming from, in a weird way, we talk about how many studio films actually play TIFF now. And now when the Netflix films play, we're like, well, there's a studio film, a pre-bought studio film that's going to be playing the Toronto International Film Festival, which is as weird as when Warner has a film there or when Disney has Nomadland.
Yeah, I would say that people, I mean, the whole argument with the Oscars for the last however long, 10, 15 years, is that the Oscars have been seen increasingly as irrelevant to the average viewer. You know, when Hurt Locker won Best Picture, everyone went, what? The Hurt who? Like, they didn't, other than the studio people who were pounding the drum saying you got to see Hurt Locker. It made like $10 million at the box office, or 20 million. It was a ridiculously low number. People did not have the access to it, or at least didn't want to see it, because they were going to spend their money on a superhero film. When you think of a thing like Mank, everybody knows. I would say everybody knows that Mank is produced by Netflix, because as soon as you're on Netflix, they give you a little red paintbrush swoosh. So put it in that corner. This is ours. This is ours. Oh, it got 10 nominations. There must be something happening there, and I can watch that anytime I want. The access is there because they've already got the eyeballs. I'm not sure what their subscription is, but I know it's a global thing. So they can drop Mank in Portugal, and everybody knows it's there. Nomadland is coming to Star Plus, but it didn't initially. They went through the traditional route. So people have heard about Nomadland, but do they know it's Disney? Probably not.
No, but they'll know that's where they can find it.
Right?
Like when it comes out, they'll know they can only find it on Disney Plus.
Now, but it's been in theaters for 4 months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that's what I mean. Like, I don't know that it's as important to Disney to have like the public concept of ownership. It's just that when it comes to VOD, the only place you can find it is on Disney Plus. That's their win.
Right. That's fair. Well, they don't need the name brand. They don't need the name brand. I think Jason's absolutely right when he talks about Netflix wanting to be seen as a major studio. I think that's bang on, because that red swoosh, for whether it's from whether it's from Mank or from The Irishman or what have you, they may say, hey, look, these conversations are taking place in the awards ceremonies. They're ours. Remember us.
Look, I expect their best Oscar chances this year is the Octopus movie, right? It's a lovely little documentary about an octopus that everybody saw because it popped up on their Netflix thing, and it's what voters saw, much more so than some incredible documentaries that were again fought over by these VOD companies. I mean, my favorite documentary of the year, Boy State, was Apple. They spent tens of millions of dollars of it, and did a pretty decent Oscar campaign, but didn't win by having a nomination. But nonetheless, I'm happy because the filmmaker got a gazillion dollars for making a film that I really love. So from the outside, I'm happy for Rian Johnson. God bless. May Rian Johnson make a whole bunch of other movies. May other filmmakers that traditionally would have been looked over by the studios, now that you are actually looking at metrics about who actually watches this stuff and who engages with this stuff to drive some of their buying decisions, God bless. It's nice when they do that and they know the movie's not going to make any money and they still invest it because they think eventually it will make money. Whatever. There's a balance now, I think, between Netflix, between doing stuff which is extremely cynical, like signing up it's the Eddie Murphy stuff that I get. He's on Amazon. I've already forgotten, but like the 12 picture deals that they offered Eddie Murphy because they know they're terrible. But how is that different than the Bruce Willis VOD nonsense that he does in Eastern Europe? And he shows up and shoots for a day and a half. So we as film lovers, as people who want the cinema to go on forever, are certainly flustered, is the word, bemused by what is all happening. I don't think we're angry that Netflix spent this money. It's not our money. Wouldn't it be nice if we got some of this money? It doesn't work that way, unfortunately, as much as people think it does. Nonetheless, Netflix here, I believe, is literally putting their giant foot down like a Monty Python sketch and saying, hey, kids, we're going to invest in something that you may think is ridiculous, but we are smarter than you. And we are going to know that this stuff is going to lead to a hell of a lot more in the decade to come.
So does the shift from creative recognition turn to sort of the shift to getting paid for all these filmmakers out there? Because like in the past, it was about the art, it was about the award, it was about this, it was about that. Now with this, it's like, fuck it, I'm getting paid. That's the win.
When was it like that?
In years past, I would say. I mean, everyone wants to get paid, but I mean, there was always a certain sort of push towards sort of the award season and sort of the recognition on that front, and then they got paid. Now it seems like, okay, Rian Johnson's getting paid, so he must be good. Like, I mean, it almost seems like the process has been shifted in terms of sort of recognition, at least from my perspective.
I don't know about that. I mean, I still think that old model will work. Is that, I think that you'll see a lot of people getting paid earlier.
Yeah,
I don't think. I think that with Rian Johnson, he's already established his brand. I think that what you're still going to see is what Disney's model is, where you have somebody who makes a couple of half decent indie films and they got hired to do a Marvel movie and then they get paid, or they win an award and then they get paid. I still think you have to do that, because I don't think you're going to drop $450 million on something that doesn't already have an established voice. Like, if I set out to make my own murder mystery, Netflix isn't going to say, great, here's 200 million. I wouldn't mind it if they were. If they're listening right now,
that goes for all four of us.
They're always listening. Yeah, I think that's a really good point too. Like, it's not Rian Johnson being given $450 million to make 2 original films. He's being given $450 million to extend a successful franchise.
Yeah.
So it's Netflix wants this. It's not that they want to be in the Rian Johnson business. They want to be in the Knives Out sequel business. I mean, I'm sure they're happy to work with Johnson. Who wouldn't be?
They want the successful IP business. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. He makes interesting movies generally, but also this, as you all mentioned, this brings him into the fold, and maybe he'll generate something else while they're there, and they'll get something else out of it that they can also pay a ridiculous amount of money for. But in this particular case, they're indicating that they want more tentpoles rather than the guy.
Who loses here? Okay, I've been all super positive in a weird way, which is new for me.
Nobody loses.
Lionsgate loses.
I suppose. But they're probably going to get something out of this, right? There's got to be some sort of...
There may be something, but nonetheless, Lionsgate are the ones that took the initial risk. Lionsgate are the ones that actually put the original money for it, that gave them in other words, that started it. We are back in a weird way to a music model, but an old school music model, because there's no money in music anymore. There's all the prestige that used to be in signing an act and waiting for records for them to act be a big successful artist is not done. Music has died in a contemporary pop setting because it has been so mechanized and so data driven that it has sucked the life out of it. And if there is something to worry about, it's that all of these things do become so data driven that they just become truly product, and we're going to miss out on something. But right now we have a Wild West situation whereby people are still taking chances. You can still find Emeretti gazillionaires that are willing to spend money in indirect ways and fund some sort of mini independent studio to have somebody give something that's astonishing. That then gets spotted at a festival or some sort of way. It gets picked up, and then careers are blossomed, and other movies get made. Rian Johnson came out of the indiest of indie circumstances and has steadily built himself. We thought he won the lottery when he got a Star Wars film. He really won the lottery when he got Netflix to buy his silly little beautiful Agatha Christie-like movie. So yes, I can be both cynical and non-cynical simultaneous, but I really think that we are seeing here is so much of the aesthetic and financial pressure about this type of element mirroring what happened in the heydays of the music industry, because I think people are wanting to see stuff. They are still craving, and on a fundamental level, I think people still love movies enough to find ways of making new ones. Yes, like music now, it's going to be on Netflix and then 2 weeks later might be forgotten. So we may be killing the industry by saving it, but that is a whole nother conversation to have.
But won't the chances always still be taken because of the constant demand for product? I mean, there has to be something feeding the system, and there has to be those little micro shoots. So to a degree, there has to be some of those little micro shoots feeding the system, just because there's got to be more and more to push out there for, like you say, to be forgotten about 2 weeks later. I mean, be that good or bad, I don't know, but the stuff's going to be out there. Does that put more onus on us to find, like us as critics, to find that stuff?
Just let me wrap up this tiny little box. Right now, there's no more music ever being made than now. In the history of human expression, more music is being made. There's never been fewer people in the last 100 years making money off of music, right? Movies are different because people have to see things in order for a movie to work, right? And much what Netflix does at its best is provides hundreds and hundreds of millions of people around the world the ability to see something. So yes, if it's a one-hit wonder on Netflix, A, the artist, the filmmakers have already been paid, and B, a film comes out and 150 million people see it on the first week. Full stop. Yeah. They might see 2 minutes of it. That's a whole nother conversation as well. But nonetheless, that's where we're at now, right? So that we're at in the pop charts could you be a one-hit wonder and live off of that one-hit wonder? It used to be that film that I saw at a festival 15 years ago that nobody remembers and maybe got a DVD release. Now it's a Netflix production as opposed to a Netflix something that they're showing, and that gives it a sort of a greater lifespan hypothetically, but also a bigger explosion at the outset.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think that's probably a good note to end on, because I see my Zoom counter counting down, but I just, thanks boys, as always, thank you for the time, and thanks for blathering and debating on current issues of the day in our business, which we don't get to do anymore after a screening, which is, I think, the thing that I miss the most about not going to press screenings.
Yeah, I miss it all. It's been way too long.
Yeah.
We got 3 minutes left. I'm going to ask the question to you guys. Do you think that this purchase will mean more people will subscribe to Netflix than already do?
I mean, in it will probably get 2 or 3 people to sign on. Yeah, probably. But I don't think it's going to have a massive effect. I think that ship has sailed. I think anybody who wants Netflix already has it.
Yeah.
Which is what's going to kill Netflix. Because Netflix is this weird ass Ponzi scheme where you have to have more and more people going in order for it to expand, in order for them to spend $400 million on movies.
But Netflix now needs to maintain it. See, that's the thing. In an age of cord cutting, and I can sign up for a month or for a free trial, or a week for a free trial, or $9.99 like for Crave, so I can see that, so I can binge watch Game of Thrones and then turn it off. Netflix needs to show that they're still sticking around. And so I think Norm's absolutely right that, I mean, I think it's like 2 billion subscribers. I'm not sure. It's a ridiculously high number. It's like insane, but there are families of people all living in the same house use it. There are people sharing their Netflix. There's a ceiling to this, but there isn't a ceiling to people that will cancel their account to sign on to Disney Plus or to sign on to Amazon. And they have to show that they're still competing, and all the press is going to the other guys right now. Like, that's just the reality.
I would like to see Benoit Blanc solve the mystery of how Netflix is going to continue doing this. That is what I want.
That'll be the third. That'll be the third movie.
That's the third movie. That's the third movie.
Well, anyway, boys, happy Good Friday. Hope we see you all soon. Other than that,
stay safe, everybody.
Stay safe, everybody.
Thank you.
Ciao, boys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks,
guys. That was fun.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.